Welcome to another edition of Types and Figures. He's called the Jews' enemy and the adversary. He desired to be like the king, and he sought to destroy all Jews. He is Haman, and he's the subject of today's edition of Types and Figures. We're looking in the book of Esther, and Haman clearly is the adversary and the enemy of Esther and all the Jews. And as such, we're going to see he is a type and figure of Satan. Now, who's the elect child of God's enemy and adversary? God tells us in 1 Peter chapter 5, verse 8, that it is the devil. There we read in 1 Peter chapter 5, verse 8, "Be sober, be vigilant, because your adversary the devil, as a roaring lion, walketh about, seeking whom he may devour." We're introduced to Haman in Esther chapter 3, verse 1, where we read, "After these things did King Ahasuerus promote Haman, the son of Hammedatha the Agagite, and advanced him, and set his seat above all the princes that were with him." You'll notice it starts out in Esther 3, verse 1 by saying, "After these things." And what that's referring to is after Bigthan and Teresh, the two rebel doorkeepers who we learned about from our previous Types and Figures, who represented the apostate church at the end of the church age, were exposed and hung. And as we've previously learned, King Ahasuerus is a type of God himself. If Haman represents Satan, we have to ask, did God ever promote Satan? And if he did, when did he do it? Well, yes, God did indeed promote Satan, and that was at the end of the church age and the beginning of the Great Tribulation, and that began May 21st, 1988, and that's when God loosed Satan, and this is when Satan entered into all the churches and congregations and became the ruler over them. If you turn to 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, we read about the man of sin, the son of perdition. We read in 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, verse 4, "Who opposeth and exalteth himself above all that is called God, or that is worshipped, so that he as God sitteth in the temple of God, showing himself that he is God." Satan took his seat in the churches, which means he began to rule. And at the start of the Great Tribulation in 1988, he began to rule in all the churches, which was a fulfillment of Matthew 24:15, when the abomination of desolation began standing in the holy place. In Esther 3, verses 5 and 6, we read about Haman being full of wrath because Mordecai refused to bow or give reverence to him. And as a result, he sought to destroy all of Mordecai's people, who were the Jews. And that's a picture of the fact that it has always been the desire of Satan to destroy Christ and his people. And we can see this in Revelation chapter 12, verse 17, where the woman represents the elect of God and the dragon represents Satan. Let's read Revelation chapter 12, verse 17. "And the dragon was wroth with the woman, and went to make war with a remnant of her seed, which keep the commandments of God, and have the testimony of Jesus Christ." So this is the enemy we're discussing here. The devil is making war against the elect. As Haman desires to kill Mordecai and all the Jews, so it is that Satan desires to destroy Christ and his people. And if you read Esther chapter 6, verses 6 through 9, notice how Haman, thinking that he was the man to be honored by the king, sought to wear the king's royal apparel and the king's crown. That Haman desired to be like the king clearly points to the fact that Satan desired to be like God. Let's read Isaiah chapter 14, verses 13 and 14, and this is referring to Satan. "For thou hast said in thine heart, I will ascend into heaven, I will exalt my throne above the stars of God. I will sit also upon the mount of the congregation in the sides of the north. I will ascend above the heights of the clouds. I will be like the Most High." So it's always been Satan's goal to be like God. And that's exactly why he entered into the Garden of Eden, to deceive man. If man would obey him rather than God, well, he'd be the one that received worship of man. And this has always been the case all through history. Haman was ever prospering and increasing in power until a particular day. And if we were to go through it carefully, we would find out that the book of Esther reveals that day as being the 17th day of the second month. And that was the turning point for Haman, the day when his rule was taken away and the king commanded for him to be hanged on the gallows. So what's so important about the 17th day of the second month? Well, that's the same date when the flood began in Noah's day. In Genesis chapter 7, verse 11, we read that God began to pour out the waters of the flood on the 17th day of the second month, in Noah's 600th year. And again, as you might recall, the 17th day of the second month is also the underlying Hebrew calendar date for May 21st, 2011. That's exactly 7,000 years after the flood, which was the beginning of the Day of Judgment. That's the day when Satan's authority was taken away and the kingdoms of this world that he ruled over became the kingdoms of the Lord Jesus Christ. Isn't it amazing that we find this same date in all three of these events, and each one is pointing to the start of Judgment Day? We know that nothing is accidental in the Bible, since God is the author. Haman, a type and a figure of Satan.